this place? Huh? Oh. Yeah?
Hello everyone. We're at the end of the year 2023, another difficult one, and I thought it would be nice to do a compilation video of games I've been playing and also completed very recently. So I decided to limit it to just this month, December. That sort of makes sense. And I'll just put together some quick video footage of games I've played a little or some quite a bit more, with just a bit of commentary, but keep it short. And the important thing is give you an idea of what else I'm playing, because let's face it, the games that finally do make it into a full video are not that many. It's simply a matter of time and the labour involved to put together a decent video. Anyway, enough with the preamble. Let's dive straight in to the games. Nayuta is an 11-year-old PSP game, remastered, and it's a typical Falcom game. It has a strong story with all of the typical fantasy elements that we all love. It is basically a dungeon crawler, but with a healthy dose of platforming and some light puzzles. What surprised me was the amount of dialogue due to the story. These people just don't know how to stop talking. Nayuta reminds me very much of certain Ys games. It has a similar fast-flowing combat, and the integrated platforming and puzzles remind me of other games such as Ys Origin or Ys The Oath in Felghana. The game starts out really easy, and it's quite the button masher. There aren't many options to worry about apart from jumping, attacking and dodging. And then there's your companion who has a sort of magic spell attack, but that's it. However, in typical Falcom fashion, at some point, for me it was near the very end of chapter 1, it suddenly spikes up in difficulty a bit. It's not that any one element is particularly difficult, and the bosses are not a huge obstacle either. It's usually if you get a combination, especially platforming and combat, and maybe combating in confined spaces, it can get difficult. I really like these old-fashioned games, as you know, and although my fingers sometimes find the platforming a bit on the tricky side, I usually manage with repetition. Looking at the somewhat blocky graphics on my TV screen, I can appreciate how this would have blown people's socks off on the PSP. It would have looked gorgeous in a smaller compressed format. The only small downsides, as I see it, are: one, you cannot save while inside a dungeon, which is a bit unusual for a portable title. However, really big dungeons are split up in parts, and you can exit to the world map from any one completed part. The other point is probably only a bit of trouble for me, because I'm absolutely hopeless without a map in most games. The dungeon layout here is very good, as you'd expect from Falcom, and not too convoluted, so you can usually find your way around. But I sometimes obviously missed a few turnings, I can tell, when I get the stage clear results, that I've obviously missed something. But it really isn't a big issue, unless, like me, you are absolutely useless without a map. In short, Nayuta is an old-fashioned delight, especially for those who love classic RPGs, and in particular the Falcom style of mixing it up. Sword of the Vagrant is my comfort game. I often play it in the evenings, and I don't play it every day. Whenever I return to it, I just pick it up, just quickly check the controls again, and off I go, and I'm happy. It's an indie side-scrolling hack-and-slash game, and you can see from the graphics probably straight away that it is deeply inspired visually by Vanillaware games. In particular, Dragon's Crown would spring to mind. They did a good job. The graphics are nice, even if not quite Vanillaware status. I got a lovely poster with my physical copy of the game, and we laminated it. It looks superb. You play as Vivian, the Vagrant sellsword, and you'd think with a hack-and-slash game the story would be pretty minimal and maybe thin, but that is not the case. There is actually a fascinating world behind it, and deeply engrossing story about Vivian's background. I think this could be called safely a hidden gem game, not because it's astoundingly brilliant. No, it's actually pretty basic, but sometimes basic and simple is good if it's well done, and if it's got that gameplay loop addictiveness that we all love so much. It got its hooks into me. Once I start, I actually find it a bit difficult putting the controller down again. One factor is probably the generous loot available, and there is so much you can upgrade and cook and craft, and most of it is useful. It's got a map, which is very serviceable, if not pretty. I use it all the time. And together with the fast travel points, it's pretty easy to get around. I like that while you do have a main mission, there are also side quests, and you are pretty free to go whichever direction you like and explore and do some other stuff. I find combat satisfying. The controls are well designed. Some of the bosses actually do pose a bit of a challenge. I certainly had to repeat one or two of them. Sometimes you need to backtrack because you weren't able to do something specific at the time. It was maybe too difficult. So I get just a bit of a feel of a Metroidvania from this game as well. I don't think anybody else has called it that. It's got some very basic jumping platforming, but this sort of going back in the map reminds me of other Metroidvanias, so I would say there might be a touch of it in that, but that's just me. It came out originally for PC, but a year ago it was made available on all console platforms. I have had absolutely no problems playing it on PS4, even on the old OG PS4. If you like the sound of the Sword of the Vagrant, know that there is a trophy called Slay the Chicken. Are you surprised? I hope this will make you laugh. I know absolutely nothing about Star Wars. I've never watched a movie. I've never played a Star Wars game. One day I was combing through my list of PS Plus games and I saw this one. And I thought, well, there's always a first time. Why not give it a go? I do that plenty of times on Game Pass with all sorts of games I have no idea about that I normally would probably not approach. But That's the beauty of it. You might discover something. You just never know. And you know what? I had a great time from the moment I started up this game. I was surprised to discover I had to do an awful lot of platforming. I hadn't expected that at all. But the platforming was actually not too bad. I could manage it. In fact, it's running pretty well on the PS4. Once again, that surprised me, being a game of this scale. The controls are well thought out, and I only had to get used to the combat, which is of a type that I'm not that familiar with, since I don't usually play this type of game. But with a bit of practice, I managed to get on top of that as well. So I haven't played much yet, but it's the sort of game I hope to get back to and enjoy it. However, I'm not quite sure whether I'd be able to make it all the way through a game of this type, so I would welcome your input if you think it's manageable for someone like me with practically no experience at all of the Star Wars franchise of games. Poodlepa and I were watching an anime on Netflix called Onimusha, and we really liked it. It's good. And I thought, Onimusha, an old PS2 series of games by Capcom, but I actually have a copy of the remastered version for the PS4. Never played it, it's just been sitting in my backlog like so much else. I thought, no better time than now. I wasn't really expecting too much, it being an old PS2 game, but goodness me, did it blow me away. It's set in the Sengoku period in Japanese history, so 15th, 16th century. I just love that whole historical ambience. And this game is basically a dungeon crawler. A hack and slash dungeon crawler. And like all games in this genre, it can get repetitive, and you either get into the swing of it and love it, or you just walk away. Well, in my case, I completely fell in love with it. The opening sequence is artistically superb in my opinion, and this is the famous scene where our hero Samanosuke is being given the demon glove or gauntlet. Yes, that might give anyone a headache. And this is where the gameplay finally starts. This is the first proper combat scene. Our hero has to practice his sword skills for the first time. You can see now clearly that this is a PS2 game. However, I think they've cleaned it up really nicely. There's a lot of the supernatural and horror elements in Onimusha, so if that side of things appeals to you as it does to me, you might be in for a treat. You see Samanosuke collecting those soul orbs every time he defeats enemies, and that's very important, of course, for upgrading and upskilling. The backgrounds, by the way, are pre-rendered. But honestly, I don't mind. And I would say it probably helps with delivering a smooth frame rate. I just love the way the whole game is designed, with sometimes short cutscenes in between, a bit of humour just to leaven the situation a bit.
本当に申し訳ない。お前たち、一体どうしたんだ?
The competence behind this game is nothing short of amazing, and you can tell how they put thought into every step that you take in the game. The gameplay mechanics are really straightforward. There is no great complexity about it. You do have different weapons and you acquire more skills as you go along, but it never gets complicated. The important mechanic is upgrading your gear and your skills. I find it quite simply satisfying. You're, after all, not just running around hacking and slashing. There are a few other things like puzzles and finding collectibles like documents. What's so cohesive about this game is the level design. It's really, really good. It keeps feeding you around the castle in a progression of things to do. And there is a map if I get lost. I'm just really impressed with the design of the whole thing. And now it's time for the first boss fight.
雪姫はどこだ?
ちょうどいい。腹が減っていたところだ。お前を食ってやる。そこを動くな。
Have I upgraded enough? Will I be able to dodge around this really awkward area with this crater pit in the centre and him smashing his huge club around? I just kept running around this crater pit. The PS2 camera is, of course, not the best. I was prepared to lose this fight the first time. I just wanted to figure out his patterns and how I could move around. One issue during longer fights is replenishing your skill meter with those orbs. The pacing for when you do use special skills has to be carefully considered. But I actually managed to get him, so that was nice. I don't expect to get off so lightly in later bosses, though.
うまそうな人間食い損ねた。
今度はお前がネズミの餌になりやがれ。
I hope you agree that this was satisfying. I'll leave you with another delightfully creepy cutscene.
美しい血が滴る。こいつも私の手にかかれば。なんだこの匂いは。誰だそこにいるのは。なんだ人間か。
てめえのゲームか。
大した口の利きようだ。お前のような威勢のいいやつに会うのは信長以来だな。
信長
I won't tell you what happened to Nobunaga, no spoilers, but there's of course another fight. And then there are many, many more to come. Yummy. My favourite genre, tactics RPG. You know the drill. You have a map with a nice terrain layout, and you need to work your way through, making strategic placements, tactical decisions, trying to fulfill the mission and eliminate the enemies. Turn-based goodness. This is probably my most played game of the month, and I'm only, I think, about a third of the way through. I like to take my time with tactics games, exploring all the different mix and match options, which path you take towards new classes and how to combine them. This game is heaven for those sorts of processes. Mind you, I do spend nearly half of my time in the menus. I decided very early on to spend as much money as I could afford on recruiting until I had a complement of 9 characters, some of whom, like the Plague Doctor, I could only very slowly level up. But I think this strategy paid off, and I'm at this stage of the game in full possession of 9 pretty well-rounded combatants. It has real good depth and complexity to it, but it is never overwhelming so that you'd say there is too much, I can't really cope with all that. It's very well balanced. It's a truly solid RPG. So why don't I sound more enthusiastic about the game? Well, I think the cause of that is the story. There is careful world building. The dialogue is well written. The characters are distinct. But I simply can't get overly excited about the story itself. I haven't got deeply immersed in it. I find it also pretty slow moving. Now, that might be the fault of my slowish gameplay, I don't know, but the exciting bits are few and far between. It feels to me like the writing team approached the whole task with a great deal of caution, not wanting to make any mistakes, and that is of course laudable. But in the process, it seems to me somehow a spark was lost. If we look at the dialogue, for example, once again I would describe it as carefully tailored. It hardly ever truly surprises me, and the attempts at humour are fine, but once again perhaps just a bit too, well, obvious. Overall, I'd say this story is still much better written than a whole bunch of indie RPGs I have come across. There's clearly a skilled and committed team behind this, so please take my criticism with a grain of salt. It's simply my personal impression of the story. I obviously wouldn't be playing the game hours upon hours if I found the story utterly boring and poorly written. Like with so many other indie RPGs that are stretched for funds during the development phase, at least a bit of voice acting I think would have lifted the game quite a bit. By the way, Rainer is so far my favourite character as a character. He is also a good build once you get him specced up a bit, like with the gadgeteer stuff and then into higher classes. And Kyrie or Kyrie is a great all-rounder and of course has the marked class. And apart from that, I also prize Anadine very much. She really packs a punch. Once she gets those special abilities after her, let's just say, blackout. The graphics are great, and the character portraits are full of individuality. The 2 RPGs that truly captured my heart and mind this year were no surprises, Sea of Stars and Chained Echoes. I haven't finished them yet, so I will probably talk about them at a later date. I am waiting for my physical items from the Kickstarter for Sea of Stars. That's promised to come in the early part of 2024, so I reckon I'll be doing a video separately about that then. I hope you enjoyed my little compilation of some of the games I play in between the major ones. I wish you all the very best for the new year. I hope to have part 2 of games I played ready for you in early 2024. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.